So I'm finally back out in the garage to work on this steering wheel. It's been like a month since I worked on this last. Sometimes life just gets in the way of your projects. And I can't prioritize a steering wheel over work or family things, but tonight I got some time and I'm gonna get this thing ready for paint. So last time I worked on it, I cut out the broken piece here after I finally got it off of the golf cart and glued in this new piece. So what I have to do next is shape this down. I've sanded basically the whole thing. I'm gonna put some nice stain on here and we'll paint this center section. But the first thing I wanna do before I get shaping is I'm gonna put a screw in from the back. So how this is put together is there's this metal ring which attaches down here. This is all kind of one piece. And the black plastic piece on the inside and the wooden part on the front sandwich that metal piece, and it's held on with these rivets. And they're not really tight and there's a little bit of movement, which is probably really important because the wood and the metal and the plastic are all going to change shape at different rates because of temperature and humidity fluctuations. So they need to be sort of free moving. And what worries me is this wood that I added here, it probably is a different species of wood than the other one. So it's also going to change shape. So you won't be able to see it once it's on the cart, but I'm gonna drill through here and put a little stainless steel screw. And I have my jar of miscellaneous stainless steel screws here. Hopefully I've got one that's gonna work out just right. So I found a little screw that's gonna work. So now I have to drill through the plastic, through the metal and into the wood. And I don't wanna go too deep and come out the other side. I want this to be so that you'd have to look at the back side of the steering wheel to see that there's a screw there at all. So I really only need to go the length of the screw. Drilling past the length of the screw doesn't really do me any good. Just have a vacant hole down there. And that will get me, about halfway into the piece of wood. So that should hold just fine. So plastic drilled easy. Now we're into the metal. And there we go. There's our hole. It's gonna go in there nicely. And I'm gonna run a countersink bit on that because, again, I don't want you to be able to feel this or even know it's there unless you look at it. So this way you won't be able to feel the head of the screw with your fingers. More. One of the problems with drilling into plastic is it gets hot and starts to melt, so you got to drill it really slow. Take some breaks. That should be good. So we're countersunk and the screw's ready to go in. I think that's about perfect. So now it's time to start shaping this piece that we added in. And I don't want to risk damaging this black plastic piece, so I'm going to put a few layers of tape on it and then basically start sanding this into shape. So I've got the steering wheel clamped down and I'm going to start shaping. I'm actually going to start with this 90-degree die grinder with a flap wheel on it. This is not a woodworking tool traditionally, but it does a great job of removing a lot of material fairly quickly, which is what I need to do. The trick is to not take off too much because you can't put it back. If I do that, I'll have to sort of start over with a new insert piece of wood there. So let's start some shaping. I've gone as far as I want to with the die grinder. Now I'm going to switch to sandpaper, starting with 120 grit, and I have a rubber sanding block, which is going to be good for these outside pieces and the top. And I also have a sanding sponge. I like these for contours, and you can kind of twist these and bend these a little bit into the shape that you need. And I like these. These are actually for my orbital sander, but they fit great to hold them like this and do a little bit of sanding. So the trick here is to sand until you can feel it. You won't be able to see it, but you got to be able to feel that contour. So right now, it's pretty close on the edges, but there's like a hump in the middle. It should be a nice smooth curve, and it's like a bumpy curve. So I sand a little bit more on the outside. The other thing you have to be careful of is putting flat spots when you're using one of these rubber blocks. That's really good. Okay, I'm going to switch to the sponge because that will contour to this a little better. And I need to go with a finer grit than this, so I don't want to go 100% of the way because I'm going to take a little bit more off with a softer grit sandpaper. So you can see right here, that kind of a shadow line there. That's where this piece I put in is higher, and the same thing over there. And that's actually, there's sawdust and glue and stuff building up there. But up on the top, you don't have those lines because it's smooth. That's a nice way to visually see that, but if you pass your fingers, your hand across, you can 100% feel it. And because this is curved, I need to take more off in the center to keep that curve. I can sand it right on the edges and take that line out so it's nice and smooth there. But what I'll do is I'll create a bump in the middle. So I need to sand more in the middle than I do on the edges to bring the whole thing down. I think we've got it with this sandpaper. So next up is 220. So much finer. That's gonna basically bring me up to the point where I'm ready to put stain on this. Oh, I'm very happy with that. Wow. When you have small parts like bolts to paint, a piece of cardboard with a bunch of holes poked in it is a great way to hold those so you can spray all these at once. So they'll get a nice dusting of black paint. These ones poke through the back, so I'm actually going to paint the tips of them as well. But if you've got nuts that go on these bolts, you can put the nuts on the back, paint the front, get the heads looking nice, paint the nuts on the back, make your part look real fancy. So I'm working on the final assembly of this steering wheel. I've got all of these bolts in. You saw me paint the head of these. And the trouble with painting bolts and trying to keep them nice is you almost always nick the paint a little bit, tightening them up, which is why I usually paint bolts black, and then I can touch them up with a black paint marker. That's the easiest way I've found to keep these looking good. So this adapter here that bolts onto the back, I found some bolts that'll fit. And in the first video, I showed how the horn ring goes on, and this is the contact to make the horn honk. I'm not using that, so I'm just gonna leave that off, and there were shoulder bolts so that could move. So I can just put this on the way it is with regular bolts. That'll make life a lot easier. And it's actually marked top. So this is the top of the steering wheel. It's the way you want it to look. So with the top lined up, pointing up, that goes on there. And these, it doesn't go on any other way. If you turn it like this, these are not equally spaced, so the holes don't line up the same that way. One of them's always going to be off. So with the top pointing up, I put the steering wheel the way I want it facing up. And I'm going to put a little bit of thread locking compound on each of these bolts, because the last thing I want to do is have a steering wheel fly off while somebody I know is driving this. Or worse, maybe somebody I don't know. Okay, so those are all tightened down. They're Loctited in, so they're not going to come out because I don't want the steering wheel falling off. And the black little cover, and this little cover goes in here, and I'm going to actually glue that in with silicone, because this is not going to work as a horn button anymore. We're not using the horn, but we just want it there for looks. So the only thing left to do is to mount the steering wheel onto the steering column. Now, I don't have the nut right now. I gotta wait for my friend to bring that over. But this will slide on. And the only important thing to remember is to make sure that the wheel, in this case single wheel, and a normal vehicle 2 wheels, are pointed straight ahead. Because if you put the steering wheel on, clock straight, and your wheels aren't straight, you're gonna be driving down the road like this all the time. Installed.